I never thought the man I built a life for would destroy mine in a single evening. One moment I was toasting his success under the golden lights of an expensive restaurant, and the next, I was staring at divorce papers, my name printed neatly on a document that ended 5 years of sacrifice with a single sentence. 5 years of early mornings at a bakery, 5 years of night shifts at a hotel, 5 years of paying rent, tuition, books, and every single meal while my husband studied to become a doctor. And his thank you gift. A cold envelope slid across a dinner table and the words, "We're not on the same level anymore, Liana. I can't be seen with someone like you." That moment rewrote everything I believed about love. But before I tell you how I turned that pain into power, how I made him regret every word he spoke that night, let me take you back to where it all began. When I close my eyes, I can still hear the applause echoing through the grand hall of Chicago Medical College. It was Adrian's graduation day. He stood on stage in his black gown, shoulders squared, a confident grin on his face as he received his medical degree. The crowd cheered, parents, friends, proud families. And there I was in the middle row, clapping until my hands stung. That was our dream, or so I thought. His success felt like my victory, too. I remember glancing at my own hands, cracked, rough from kneading dough and typing reports. Hands that hadn't seen a manicure in years. Hands that had built his dream brick by brick. I whispered under my breath, "We did it." Beside me, his mother, Vivian Blake, sat upright and regal in her designer suit, pearls glimmering under the lights. She looked every bit the part of a proud mother, except her pride wasn't for me. She'd never liked me. From the day I married Adrian, she made it clear she thought I was beneath him. I was the sweet girl from the wrong side of town, the one who talked too plainly and didn't fit the doctor lifestyle. But I didn't care. I loved her son. I believed that love made us equals. After the ceremony, when Adrian walked off stage, he went straight to her, not me. He hugged her tight, smiling like a boy who'd just proven the world wrong. "I told you, Mom. I'd make it. I never doubted you," she said proudly, brushing imaginary dust off his robe. I waited my turn. When he finally looked at me, I smiled through the lump in my throat. "I'm so proud of you, Adrian." He gave a short nod. "Yeah, thanks." That was it, no warmth, no spark, just thanks. Still, I ignored the sting. Maybe he was overwhelmed, maybe he was just tired. He told me he'd made dinner reservations that night at the Glass House, one of the most expensive restaurants downtown. "Let's celebrate properly," he said. "Of course," I replied softly. "Whatever you want." That night, the city skyline sparkled through the glass walls of the restaurant. Everything felt too polished, too perfect, like I'd stepped into a world that didn't belong to me. Adrian looked right at home in his new fitted suit. His confidence had a new edge to it, sharper, heavier. His mother sat next to him, scrolling through her phone, posting photos of Dr. Blake and proud mom. I sat across from them, trying to start a conversation. "All your hard work finally paid off," I said. "We can finally rest, huh? Maybe plan a little trip, just the two of us." Vivian laughed quietly. "Our hard work," she repeated. "Sweetheart, Adrian's the one who's been up studying all night. He deserves this moment." Her words were honeyed with venom. I looked at Adrian, expecting him to say something, to tell her that I'd been there every step of the way. But he said nothing. He just flipped through the menu like he hadn't heard a thing. I felt something break inside me right then. Dinner arrived, but it sat untouched. The silence between us was thick. Then Adrian cleared his throat. "Liana," he said, reaching into his leather briefcase. He pulled out a brown envelope and placed it in front of me. "What's this?" I asked, smiling nervously. "A surprise, a job application." "Are you finally letting me take a break?" Vivian's eyes glimmered like she already knew what was coming. "Open it," Adrian said flatly. My heart thudded, my hands trembled as I slid the papers out. And then I saw it. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." My chest tightened. "Adrian, what is this?" He didn't even flinch. "It's time we go our separate ways." "What?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "You're joking." "This is your graduation day." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "That's exactly why, Liana. I'm moving into a new phase of life. You don't fit in anymore." "Don't fit in." "I'm a doctor now. I'll be working with professionals, people of my level. I can't be seen with someone who," he gestured vaguely at me, "looks like she still belongs in a motel uniform." I stared at him in disbelief. His words sliced deeper than any blade. Adrian, I said softly, I gave up everything for you. I worked double shifts. He cut me off. And I appreciate that, really, but let's be honest, you did your part. You helped me get here. It's time for both of us to move on. Beside him, his mother smiled that cruel, triumphant smile. Don't be dramatic, dear. Think of it as charity work well done. Something inside me snapped. All the exhaustion, the pain, the humiliation, it fused into something cold and sharp. I looked at her first. Charity, I repeated slowly. You think my sacrifices were charity? I turned to Adrian. You think you got here on your own? Every textbook, every meal, every rent check, it all came from me. My blood, my time, my life. The restaurant had gone quiet. People were staring, forks frozen midair. I didn't care. You call me ordinary, you're right, I said, my voice trembling but steady. I am ordinary, but at least I'm not ungrateful. I'm not cruel. Vivian scoffed. Watch your tone, young lady. I leaned closer. No. You watch me, Adrian's jaw tightened. Sit down, Liana, you're making a scene. I'm making a statement, I snapped. You might have a degree, but don't you dare pretend it's yours alone. You borrowed my life to build yours. He tried to speak, but I was already standing. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. My body was shaking, but not from sadness anymore, from fury. You said you're ashamed of me, Adrian. Fine, but one day you'll remember this face. You'll remember what it cost to wear that white coat, and when that day comes, you'll regret it. His mother rolled her eyes. You're delusional, you have nothing. You can't even afford a lawyer. A small smile crept onto my face. Actually, about that, I took out my phone. Hello, Attorney Wallace. Yes, it's Liana. It happened just like you said. Adrian blinked. Attorney who? I've been documenting every expense for 5 years, I said calmly. Every tuition payment, every receipt. My lawyer's been waiting for this. You'll be hearing from him very soon at your new hospital, I assume. Vivian's face went pale. You wouldn't dare? Oh, I dare, I said quietly. You both taught me how. I picked up the divorce papers, folded them neatly, and slipped them into my bag. These will make excellent evidence, I said. Thank you for serving them in such style. Then I turned and walked out. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but for the first time I didn't feel small. I felt alive. The moment I stepped into the cold night air, I knew something inside me had changed forever. No more tears, no more apologies. That night I wasn't a victim. I was a woman reborn. I didn't sleep. I went straight to my friend Nia's small studio apartment, still wearing my simple blue dress, my makeup smudged from tears I'd refused to let fall. When she opened the door and saw me, she gasped. Liana, oh my God. What happened? He handed me divorce papers, I said flatly. What? Tonight, right after his graduation. Her eyes widened in disbelief. That bastard. I laughed softly, not a laugh of humor, but disbelief. He said I wasn't on his level anymore. Nia hugged me hard. You don't need him, Lee. You're stronger than both of them combined. I nodded against her shoulder. I'm done crying over him. He thinks he's leveled up. He has no idea what leveling up really means. Nia pulled back, confused. What are you going to do? I looked her straight in the eyes. I'm going to make him see what happens when you betray the woman who built you. And that's exactly what I did. Because that night, I didn't just walk away from a marriage. I walked straight into a war, one I planned to win. I thought Adrian's betrayal was the worst pain I'd ever feel, but what came next would test every ounce of strength I had left. Because when the court papers hit his desk, the real battle began, and that's when he finally learned what kind of woman I truly was. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Nia's tiny living room with a mug of cold coffee, staring at nothing. The words "we're not on the same level" kept echoing in my head like a broken song. Every time I blinked, I saw that smug look on Adrian's face. Nia finally broke the silence. You called a lawyer, were you serious? Very, I said. I'd been preparing for months. Because somewhere deep inside, I'd known this was coming. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the cologne that didn't smell like his usual brand, it all added up. But I'd wanted to believe that love would fix it. So 6 months earlier, when the first doubts started to creep in, I met a quiet, sharp-eyed attorney named Marcus Wallace. He'd helped women recover educational expenses when their partners tried to walk away. At the time, I told him, maybe I'll never need this. He'd smiled and said, if you never need me, that'll be the best outcome. Tonight proved otherwise. By sunrise, Marcus had already texted, meet me at 10 a.m. we'll file today. The courthouse smelled like old paper and floor polish. My stomach was tight, but I felt strangely calm. Marcus spread a neat pile of documents in front of me. "This," he said, tapping the top sheet, "is your counterpetition. We're not fighting his divorce. We're filing our own for betrayal, material fraud, and emotional abuse. And we're attaching a reimbursement claim for every cent you spent on his education." He slid over a printed spreadsheet. Tuition transfers, textbook receipts, rent deposits, 5 years of meticulous record keeping. Total claim, he said, $486,000. We'll round up to $500K to include interest and damages. I exhaled slowly. $500,000. Marcus nodded. You earned every penny. For the first time in months, I felt something close to power. The mediation hearing came 2 weeks later. Adrian walked in wearing a tailored gray suit and that same look of practiced arrogance. His mother trailed behind him, her perfume hitting the room before she did. When he saw me sitting beside Marcus, his smile faltered. I wasn't the exhausted wife he remembered. My hair was pinned neatly, my suit pressed, my hands steady on the table. The mediator cleared her throat. "We're here to address the divorce petition filed by Dr. Adrian Blake." Marcus spoke first. "Correction. We're addressing the counterpetition filed by Mrs. Liana Brooks." Adrian frowned. "Counterpetition?" Marcus slid a thick folder across the table. "My client financed Dr. Blake's education for 5 years, tuition, rent, living expenses, totaling approximately $500,000. We're seeking reimbursement plus damages for betrayal and emotional distress." Vivian's manicured hand shot to her mouth. $500,000? That's absurd." Marcus didn't even glance at her. "We have bank records, receipts, and witness statements. The math is not up for debate." Adrian's lawyer, a slick man in an overpriced tie, flipped through the evidence and paled. Adrian slammed his hand on the table. "That was her duty as a wife?" I finally spoke. "Was it my duty to sell my grandmother's jewelry so you could buy anatomy kits? Was it my duty to skip meals so you could pay lab fees?" The room went still. Adrian stared at me, but the old intimidation no longer worked. Marcus turned to the mediator. "Given the evidence, my client will drop her damages claim if Dr. Blake accepts full responsibility for the betrayal, agrees to an uncontested divorce, and signs a mutual non-interference clause. No appeals, no future contact." Adrian blinked. "You drop the money?" I looked straight at him. "Yes, I don't want your dirty money, I just want my name back." Vivian hissed, "Don't you dare sign." Adrian grabbed the pen. His pride wanted to resist, but his fear of scandal was stronger. His signature scratched across the page, sealing his own humiliation. The gavel fell. Just like that, I was free. When we stepped outside, the sky was overcast, but it felt like sunlight. Marcus offered his hand. "You handled that like a general, not a victim." "I'm tired of being the quiet one," I said. He smiled. "Then start being the author of your own story." That night back in Nia's apartment, we packed my few things into an old suitcase. She kept glancing at me like she expected me to break down. "Are you really okay?" she asked. "I'm not okay," I said, "but I'm not broken either." "Where will you go?" "I don't know, somewhere far from here, somewhere I can build something that's mine." Nia squeezed my hand. "Then go write the next chapter?" I left Chicago 2 days later on a night bus headed south. The city lights blurred behind the window like streaks of gold tears. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough. Each mile that carried me away from that city felt like a small rebirth. In the small town of Silverton, I found a studio apartment above a bookstore and a part-time job at a community center. The pay was low, but the peace was priceless. At night I wrote. At first it was just therapy, pages and pages of memories I needed to exorcise. The exhaustion, the betrayal, the courtroom. Marcus once told me, write everything down. Pain loses power when you name it. So I did. What started as a journal became a manuscript. I called it The Dead of Dreams. When I finished the last page, I cried for the first time since that restaurant. Not from sadness, but from release. Months passed. I mailed the manuscript to 5 small publishers, half expecting nothing. Then one morning my phone buzzed. "Miss Brooks, this is Greystone Press. We read your manuscript. We'd like to meet." I nearly dropped the phone. The meeting felt like a blur, contract terms, marketing plans, an advance that made my head spin. They said, "Your story has heart. Women will see themselves in you." Within 3 months, The Dead of Dreams hit shelves nationwide. Within 6, it was a bestseller. Suddenly, people wanted interviews, podcasts, TV appearances. They called me the woman who funded her husband's success and found her own. Every time someone asked if I forgave Adrian, I smiled politely and said, I don't live there anymore. But inside, I knew forgiveness wasn't the point. Freedom was. Success brought money, and money brought opportunity. I founded the Brooks Foundation, a scholarship and medical aid program for students who couldn't afford tuition or emergency care. Helping others climb without being stepped on, that became my mission. For the first time in my life, I woke up every morning proud of the woman staring back from the mirror. 1 year after the divorce, I returned to Chicago for a charity gala. It was held in the same district where I'd once lived, only this time I arrived as the guest of honor. When I stepped onto the stage to speak, the applause sounded just like it had at Adrian's graduation, only now it was for me. I told the crowd, sometimes the worst heartbreak isn't an ending, it's an invitation to rebuild. They stood and clapped. I smiled, not for revenge, but for peace. I thought that was the end of my story. I was wrong. Because the universe wasn't done writing its twist. It started with an email. The subject line read, Urgent Medical Inquiry, Dr. Adrian Blake. My chest tightened. I hadn't heard that name in a year. The message was from a mutual acquaintance in Chicago Med. Liana, I don't know if you've heard, but Adrian's been very sick. He's been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. He's desperate and asking about your foundation's medical aid program. Please advise if you're willing to review his case. I froze. For a long time I just stared at the screen, heart pounding, hands trembling. The same man who'd said I wasn't good enough to stand beside him was now asking to stand beneath the very roof I'd built from his betrayal. I closed my laptop slowly and leaned back in my chair. The irony tasted bitter and sweet all at once. Nia called that night. You saw the email, didn't you? Yeah, I said quietly. What are you going to do? I didn't answer right away. I looked around my office. The shelves lined with books, the photographs of students we'd sponsored, the plaque with my foundation's name engraved in silver. Then I said, I'm going to hear him out. Because closure, I realized, doesn't always come in the form of forgiveness. Sometimes it comes when the person who broke you has to knock on your door for help. The next morning, my assistant told me a man was waiting in the lobby, pale, trembling, and clutching a medical file with my name on it. When I stepped out of the elevator and saw who it was, the air left my lungs. It was Adrian. And for the first time since that night at the glass house, he called me by my first name. Liana, he whispered. Please, I need you. When I saw him standing there, I almost didn't recognize him. The man waiting in my foundation's lobby wasn't the Adrian I remembered, not the polished doctor with the arrogant smile or the perfect posture. This version was thinner, almost ghost-like. His once bright eyes were sunken, his hands trembling so badly that the papers he held quivered like autumn leaves. He looked up, and for a split second our eyes met. The last time I'd seen those eyes, they'd been filled with pride. Now they were filled with fear. Liana, he whispered, please, I need you. The sound of my name and his voice did something strange to me. It didn't soften me, but it stirred something deep, the ghost of the woman I used to be. My assistant, Kira, looked between us unsure. Miss Brooks, should I? It's all right, I said quietly. Send him to the small conference room. When he passed me in the hallway, I caught the faint smell of hospital antiseptic clinging to his coat. He walked slower than I remembered. His left hand shook uncontrollably. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity, and I hated that I did. Inside the conference room, he sat across from me at the long glass table. He looked smaller than the room itself, dwarfed by the tall windows and framed photos of scholarship recipients that lined the walls. Thank you for seeing me, he said, his voice barely audible. I stayed silent for a few seconds, just studying him. You look different, I said finally. I'm sick, he said simply. I nodded. So I've heard. He shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know who else to turn to. The doctors say I have a rare autoimmune condition. It's destroying my nerves, my vision's going, my hands won't stop shaking. He held them up as if to prove it. The tremors were real. Without surgery, he continued, I'll lose my ability to operate, maybe even to walk. My heart twisted despite everything. And what does that have to do with me? He swallowed hard. I need treatment overseas. The stem cell procedure costs over $1 million. Insurance won't cover it. The hospital denied my loan. I've lost everything, Liana, the penthouse, the car, even my mother's, she's not well. I let his words hang in the air. Then I said, so you came here, to the foundation I built. He nodded slowly. They said your program funds emergency surgeries for medical professionals. I didn't know it was you until I saw the name. The Brooks Foundation? And yet you came anyway? He met my eyes. Because I have nowhere else. There was a long silence. The kind that hums louder than noise. He looked so broken that part of me wanted to reach across the table and comfort him, but another part remembered the night he handed me divorce papers as if I were an inconvenience. I straightened my posture. This foundation isn't charity, Adrian. We help based on criteria, not history. You'll have to submit an application like everyone else. He blinked. You're serious? Completely. His voice cracked. Liana, please don't make me beg. I tilted my head. Why not? You made me beg once. Beg for attention, for compassion, for respect. Beg for you to remember what love used to mean. He flinched. That was a mistake. I was stupid. No, I cut him off. You were cruel and deliberate. He leaned forward, desperate now. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but please, I'll do anything. Sign papers, volunteer, whatever you want. Just help me. I let out a long, slow breath. All right, fill out the form, bring proof of income, debts, diagnosis, and a letter from your doctor. Our review board will decide. His jaw clenched. A review board? You're the board. I smiled faintly. Exactly, which means I'll decide when and if you're worthy of the help you denied me. He looked at me as though I'd stabbed him, but I felt no satisfaction. Only the strange heaviness of poetic justice. 2 days later, his file landed on my desk, thick, desperate, complete. Attached was his medical report, proof of financial ruin, and a handwritten letter at the end. Liana, I don't ask for mercy, just a chance to survive. You always had a bigger heart than I did. I hope there's still room in it for compassion. I stared at those words for a long time. I'd spent months building a life that didn't revolve around him, a life that stood on its own. And yet, the idea of letting him suffer without lifting a finger made something inside me ache. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the foundation's empty halls, the faint hum of the city outside my windows. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of why I started this place, to give people hope when they had none. Adrian was once the reason I lost mine. Now he was the one drowning, and I had to decide whether to throw him a rope or let him sink. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Marcus. You're not seriously considering approving him, are you? He said. I haven't decided, I replied. But if I do, it'll be on my terms. What terms? The kind that teach him what humility really costs. Marcus sighed. Just don't let him back into your life, not even a little. He'll use any crack he finds. He won't, I said, not this time. That afternoon, I called Adrian back to the office. He looked worse, pale, exhausted, and thinner. His hands shook constantly now. Your application was reviewed, I said evenly, and it's been approved. He looked up sharply, disbelief flooding his face. You mean you'll help me? Yes. The foundation will cover your surgery and clear your debt. He exhaled in relief, closing his eyes. Liana, thank you. But I interrupted. You'll sign a contract first. His relief froze. What kind of contract? One that ensures the foundation gets something in return for its investment. I handed him the folder. Read it. He skimmed the pages, his face draining of color as he went. This says I'll work under your foundation's medical program for 20 years? 28, I corrected. You'll be assigned to our rural clinic in Louisiana. We call it the Rebuild Program. You'll serve the community as a resident physician under foundation sponsorship until your debt is repaid. 28 years, he said, voice cracking. That's a lifetime. I met his gaze, calm and cold. So was my marriage. He stared at me silent. His pride battled with desperation, but he was too weak to fight either. I can't work if I'm blind, he muttered finally. Then you'd better make that surgery count, I said. He picked up the pen. His hand shook so badly that the ink bled on the page as he signed. When it was over, I closed the folder and stood. Marcus will arrange your travel and transfer. You leave in 2 days. He looked at me like he wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a plea, but I'd already turned away. Good luck, Dr. Blake, I said. I hope the next 28 years teach you everything I couldn't. That night after he left, I sat in my office alone, the city lights painting gold streaks across the floor. Part of me felt vindicated. The woman who'd once begged for his love was now the one deciding his fate. But another part of me, the part I'd buried, whispered that revenge never fills the emptiness it promises to. Still, I told myself it wasn't revenge. It was balance. 2 months passed. The reports from the Louisiana clinic came in regularly. Adrian had completed his surgery in Singapore and returned in stable condition. His sight had been restored, his tremors reduced, but he was struggling to adjust to the remote clinic's harsh conditions. The staff described him as quiet, withdrawn, remorseful. Once the local paper sent a photo, a group of smiling patients posing with the new doctor from Chicago. Adrian stood among them, thinner but human again. His hands, once shaking, held a child gently. When I saw that picture, I felt something crack open inside me. Not pain, not satisfaction, just release. For the first time, I realized I didn't need to win anymore. I'd already moved on, but life has a way of circling back, even when you think the story's over. One stormy night, nearly a year after Adrian's reassignment, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it until I saw the area code, Louisiana. When I answered, a trembling voice came through the static. "Miss Brooks, this is Dr. Avery from St. Clair Clinic. I'm calling about Dr. Adrian Blake." My heart sank. "What happened?" "There's been an accident. He was driving home from an emergency call. A truck lost control in the rain. He's critical." The world around me blurred. For a long moment, I said nothing. "Miss Brooks?" the doctor asked again. "I'm here," I said finally, my throat dry. "Keep him alive. I'm coming." I was on the first flight out the next morning. As the plane lifted through the clouds, I stared out the window, heart heavy with confusion. Did I still hate him? No. Did I forgive him? Maybe not yet. But I knew one thing: no one deserved to die alone, not even him. And maybe, just maybe, the universe had brought me full circle for a reason. When I walked into that hospital room, I wasn't ready for what I saw. Adrian was barely conscious, tubes and machines surrounding him, but the moment he opened his eyes and saw me, he smiled. "Liana," he whispered, his voice breaking, "I finally understand everything." And then the monitors started to scream. The hospital smelled like rain and antiseptic. Everything felt too bright, too cold, the kind of sterile place where life and death wait quietly beside each other. When I stepped through the ICU doors, I almost didn't recognize him. Adrian lay in the bed, pale and fragile under the fluorescent lights. Tubes snaked into his arms, machines beeped beside him, and oxygen hissed softly at his nose. For a moment, I couldn't move. The man who once made me feel invisible now looked like he could vanish at any second. The nurse at the door whispered, "He's been asking for you since he woke up." My heart clenched. "He knew I was coming," she nodded. "He didn't stop saying your name." I walked closer. Each step felt heavy, like I was walking through memories. The night he gave me those papers, the courtroom, the foundation, the day I made him sign that contract. And now here we were, full circle. I stopped beside his bed. His eyelids fluttered, then opened slowly. When he saw me, his lips curved into the faintest smile. "Liana," hearing him say my name again after all this time sent a wave of emotions I couldn't even name. "I'm here," I said softly. He tried to lift his hand, but the IV lines tangled around his wrist. His voice came out cracked. You actually came." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You sounded worse than your reports described." He gave a weak laugh. "Reports? You still talk like a boss." I couldn't help a small smile. "Old habits." Silence settled between us, not awkward but heavy. His breathing was shallow, his chest rising and falling like the tide. After a while, he said, "You look different, stronger, happier." "I am," I said simply. He closed his eyes for a second, as if that answer both comforted and broke him. "I read about you," he murmured. "About the foundation, the book, the interviews. You turned pain into something beautiful." I looked down. "You were part of that pain." "I know," he whispered, "and I'm sorry." I didn't expect those words. I'd imagined them 1,000 times in my head, dramatic, rehearsed, too late. But hearing them like this from a man barely holding on made them sound real. "I was proud," he continued, his voice trembling. "Too proud to admit how much I needed you. I thought success would make me feel like somebody. But the moment you left, everything I built started to crumble. The patience, the money, the respect, it all meant nothing." he coughed, his breath rattling. I moved closer, instinctively reaching to steady him. Don't talk too much, I said quietly. You need to rest. He smiled faintly. You still care. I froze. I care about closure, Adrian, not about the past. He nodded slowly. Closure, yeah, I wanted to find you before it was too late. My throat tightened. Too late for what? To say I finally understand everything. His hand twitched toward mine. Against my better judgment, I let him hold it. His grip was weak but warm. He looked at me like he was memorizing my face. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I ruined it because I thought I could do better. But the truth is, there was no better. There was only you. The tears came before I could stop them, not because I still loved him, but because for the first time he finally saw me. I took a shaky breath. Adrian, why did you call me here? He turned his head toward the window. The rain outside hit the glass in soft, steady rhythm. Because I didn't want to die owing you more than I already do. You don't owe me anything, I said automatically. He smiled weakly. That's where you're wrong. You gave me everything and I gave you nothing but pain. You could have let me rot, but you helped me instead. I can never pay that back. His voice cracked and I felt something shift inside me, a quiet breaking, not of anger, but of the walls I'd built to keep him out. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The machines beeped softly in the background, then his breathing hitched. The monitors started to scream. Adrian, I whispered, standing quickly. Adrian, nurses rushed in, pushing me gently aside. Ma'am, please, I stumbled backward, my heart pounding as they surrounded the bed. The doctor shouted for epinephrine, the machines wailed, and I felt my body go numb. I gripped the doorway, whispering under my breath, Don't you dare die on me now, you selfish man, not before I forgive you. After what felt like an eternity, the monitor's steady rhythm returned, faint but present. The doctor exhaled. He's stable for now. I covered my mouth, tears streaming down my face. Relief and pain collided like thunder. When the nurses left, I sank into the chair beside him. His hand twitched again, searching for mine, and I let him hold it. I'm not ready to lose you, I whispered. Not like this. He stirred slightly, his eyelids fluttering open just a bit. You came back, he murmured. Yes, I said softly. I came back. A small smile touched his lips before he drifted into sleep again. For the next week, I stayed in Silverton Hospital, dividing my time between meetings and sitting by his bedside. He was in and out of consciousness, sometimes talking in fragments, apologies tangled with memories. He'd whisper things like, You always believed in me, or I see it now what you carried. Each time my chest tightened. It was strange, after everything I still couldn't walk away. Maybe it wasn't about him anymore. Maybe it was about proving to myself that compassion didn't make me weak. One night as I sat watching him sleep, the night shift nurse, a kind woman named Clara, stopped by. She smiled softly. He's lucky you're here. I sighed. Lucky isn't the word I'd use. She chuckled gently. You know, sometimes the hardest forgiveness isn't for them, it's for yourself, for still caring. I looked up at her. You sound like you've been through it. Oh, honey, she said, patting my shoulder. We all have. When she left, I stared at Adrian's face, thinner, gentler, quieter than I'd ever seen it. That was when I realized I'd been holding onto pain like armor. It had kept me safe, but it had also kept me stuck. And suddenly, I was tired of being stuck. The next morning, I asked the doctor for his discharge papers. He blinked. He's still weak. You want to move him? Yes, I said. I'm taking him to the Foundation's rehab center. He'll recover there. When Adrian woke up and saw me packing his things, confusion crossed his face. What are you doing? Getting you out of here, I said. You're not dying in this hospital. He frowned. You don't owe me that. I know, I said, tightening the strap on his bag. That's why I'm doing it. He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead his eyes filled with tears. Why are you still so kind to me? I paused, then met his gaze. Because hate kept me alive when I needed it. But it's not what I want to live on anymore. He nodded slowly, silent tears slipping down his cheeks. At the rehab center, he began to recover slowly. I visited every week, sometimes with paperwork, sometimes just with silence. We didn't talk about the past much. The silence between us said enough. One day, as I was leaving, he called after me. Liana, I turned. I'm naming my patient program after you, he said, the Brooks Initiative. It's for women who support medical students financially. I want to make sure no one ever feels used the way you did. I froze. You don't have to, I want to, he said softly. It's my way of saying thank you. And I'm sorry. For the first time, his words didn't sting, they healed. Months passed, his health improved. He started working again quietly, humbly, and I finally felt peace. One evening, I was closing up my office when an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a single letter written in his familiar handwriting. Liana, if you're reading this, it means I didn't wake up from the surgery I have scheduled next week. Don't worry, I'm not afraid. I just wanted you to know that meeting you was still the greatest gift of my life. I know I broke you once, but you helped me find myself again. If there's a next life, I hope I meet you right, not as the man who ruined you, but as the man who finally deserved you. Adrian, I stared at the letter for a long time, tears blurring the ink. That was the moment I realized life doesn't always give us perfect endings. Sometimes it just gives us a chance to forgive before the curtain closes. A week later, I got a call from the clinic, but it wasn't what I expected. Adrian's surgery had been a success, yet what he left behind changed everything. Because tucked inside his patient files was one last envelope with my name on it. And what I found inside would turn everything I thought I knew upside down. The call that came that morning had sounded ordinary, like any hospital check-in. Miss Brooks, this is Dr. Avery from St. Clair. I have some paperwork for you regarding Dr. Blake. My fingers went cold in a way they hadn't since the night he collapsed in my office the first time. I told myself to steady my breath. The plane ride back to Louisiana felt like walking through fog, close at hand, everything else blurred. When I pushed through the swinging glass doors of the small clinic, the receptionist's face softened, and she handed me a thin file with my name written across the front in Adrian's looping handwriting. He asked that only you open it, she said. I didn't want to open it. I told myself that over and over. Part of me was ready for closure. Another part still wanted the past to remain a closed book I never had to touch again. But the file was warm in my hands, and his handwriting on the flap, my name, no title, pulled at something older and softer than the armor I'd built. I sat in the little visitor chair by the window and turned the flap. Inside were three things: a short, handwritten letter, a sealed USB drive with a sticky note that read "Play this first," and a thick packet of documents, all notarized and signed. The official-looking papers made my chest tighten: deeds, assignments, legal forms. I felt a dull, incredulous kind of fear. I slid the letter out first. His handwriting had always been familiar, a rhythm I could read like a metronome. The letter was brief. Liana, if you're reading this, I'm alive and stubborn, or I'm not. Either way, I need you to know the truth I couldn't put into words when I was either too proud or too afraid. I tried to be men. I failed at being kind. I failed you. I don't expect your forgiveness. I expect you to do with this what you will. Add that was it. No flourish, no plea, just the raw admission I'd wanted him to own for years. My throat closed. I pressed the paper to my lips like the ritual of a prayer. Then I plugged the USB into my phone. The file was a single video: Adrian, alone in a small room that looked like the recovery suite in some anonymous clinic. His hair was shorter, he looked thinner, more honest. He stared into the camera for a long second like he was learning how to say the words out loud. Hi, Liana, he said when the record light clicked on. His voice was small but steady. If you're watching this, it's because either I didn't wake up from my surgery or I'm too cowardly to say any of this face to face. I'm recording it anyway because I can't leave this world without telling you everything I wish I'd said years ago. He swallowed. I lied when I said I was ashamed of you because you were ordinary. I was ashamed of my own choices. I wanted to belong to a world that could never love me back. Vivian convinced me that appearances were what mattered. I let that rot grow until it ate the best part of me. I used you. I used your kindness and your money and your patience. I treated you like an investment, and then I tried to divorce the investor when I wanted a new product. My mother, she pushed, she whispered, and she strategized. She made me believe that a wife should be ornamental, not necessary. When I was weak, she was strong. When I was ashamed, she felt pride. I want you to know she wasn't just a passive spectator. She orchestrated things. I carry that shame. I signed over everything I could sign, Liana, not because I wanted to be noble, but because I don't want her to profit from the life she helped ruin. The penthouse, the car, every account I can legally touch, they will go to the Brooks Foundation. I couldn't live in that house and look at mirrors that reflected what I had become. I've also left one more thing. There are statements, recordings, and documents in the packet that will help you if you choose to use them. They're not revenge, they're the truth. If you want legal action to be taken against Vivian for what she did, financial manipulation, coercion, those papers make it possible. I'm signing them because I can't undo the damage, but maybe I can at least stop it from happening to others. And finally, his voice trembled then, softer, small as a confession. If I don't survive, don't let this define me as the monster I became. If I do, and if you want nothing to do with me, I will accept it. I only wanted you to know the truth. I only wanted you to be safe from her and from what I allowed to become of me. Thank you for giving me life when I asked for it. I don't deserve your grace. I only ask that you use what I'm leaving you to do good. The Brooks Foundation, make it broader, stronger, make it impossible for other women to be used the way I used you. The video ended. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. He had done something I never expected. He had made a gift of his failure and turned it into tools for justice. The documents in the packet weren't just property transfers. They were a map, bank statements, signed admissions, dates, and descriptions of conversations. A few voice messages he'd kept from years before where Vivian had advised him on how to manage funds and what to say. Evidence, signed and notarized, meant to prevent his mother from selling what she'd planned to sell. He had left the means to expose her. For a long moment I sat in the sterile waiting room, the summer heat pressing against the window pane, and felt the lean, foreign sensation of being unmoored. Part of me wanted to stand up and walk away, to burn everything that belonged to him and be done. Another part, quieter and stranger, wanted to read every line, follow every lead, make sure this did what he intended it to do. Most of all, a tender part of me, the part that had learned to mend by making things that mattered, wanted to turn this rotten end into something useful. When I went through the documents, tears blurred the ink. He had indeed signed over the deed to the penthouse and executed accounts to be liquidated and transferred to the Brooks Foundation. He'd insisted the money be used for emergency medical grants and scholarships for students from backgrounds like mine. He'd assigned me sole authority to oversee the liquidation. For all his arrogance, there was a strange, sweeping humility in these motions. He could not take back what he'd done, but he could choose what his remnants would do in the world. And then, tucked at the end of the packet was something else, an address in the city, an old storage locker, and a key. I felt a prickle of curiosity, a vein of history. My hands reached for the key before I knew I'd decided to. That afternoon, with Nia by my side and Marcus's legal team on standby, I opened the storage unit. It smelled like cardboard and dust and other people's forgotten things. Inside, carefully boxed, were artifacts of a life I'd once shared with him. An old coffee mug he'd used during late-night study cram sessions, a ridiculous novelty tie he'd bought for me on an exasperated whim, a small stack of letters he'd written but never mailed, sentences about being afraid and about how he wanted to be better. There were also receipts, thousands of them. Every tuition deposit, every book purchase, every check I'd made. The boxes were not just memorabilia. They were a confession and a ledger braided together. He had kept them as proof, as contrition, for reasons I could not possibly untangle. We handed the materials to Marcus. He arranged for the proper legal filings to transfer the assets. He also agreed to proceed with a quiet, precise legal action based on the financial documents that implicated Vivian in coercive control and undue influence. The process would be slow. Nothing in law moves as fast as you want it to when people's reputations are involved. But the first steps were taken. People often ask me later whether the lawsuit felt like revenge. My answer is simple: it felt like cleaning house. Vivian had built her life on appearances. The law was indifferent to parades and pearls. It only cared about facts. I found it strangely satisfying that the thing she used to pull the strings, money, would be the very means that stripped her of those strings. She didn't respond well to being stripped. When word trickled through Venice's social circles, through the mutual acquaintances who had once posted pictures of her at charity galas and luncheon previews, Vivian's circle thinned like a skin shedding. The friends who'd laughed with her over cocktails now sent cold texts about timing and regret. The woman who once wore the room like a crown found herself sitting alone on a couch that made noises when she moved. Pride is a brittle thing, it breaks in stages. The Brooks Foundation received the proceeds 2 months after Adrian's documents were processed. We used the funds to launch a sponsored residency program that paid full tuition and emergency care for medical students from low-income communities and created an emergency medical fund for healthcare workers facing catastrophic illnesses. The program was deliberately transparent: names, numbers, scholarship recipients. We wanted to leave no room for the kind of secrecy that had once allowed an injured marriage to be hidden behind lipstick and social events. Adrian recovered in small, dignified increments. The surgery had worked, the tremors were gone enough for him to hold a scalpel properly. He was no spring chicken when he returned to me. There were lines at the corners of his eyes and a certain humility in the way he walked, but he came back and he kept his head down. He worked in the Brooks Initiative clinics for years, not as the high-flying surgeon he once imagined being, but as a doctor who treated people in rooms that smelled like antiseptic and hope. He kept a low profile. Sometimes, when the day's work was done, I'd find him in the volunteer kitchen cleaning pots, always with a small, grateful smile when he met my eye. I could have used his fall for spectacle. I could have stood on the courthouse steps and delivered a speech about justice and the cost of luxury. Instead, I used the resources he'd given to build a ladder for others. I learned that there is an enormous difference between being vindicated and being useful. One feeds the ego, the other feeds the world. Vivian's downfall was not dramatic. There were no tabloid exposes with wailing. There were quiet depositions and her attempts to explain away certain transfers that suddenly looked less like charity and more like manipulation. That unspectacular unraveling was worse for her, slower, more intimate. People you think you know can be surprisingly small when the mirror is held to the truth. Sometimes, late at night, I would take the old coffee mug from the storage box and hold it over the sink. It didn't feel like treasure. It felt like evidence of survival. I would set it down, and then I'd pick up a ledger or a scholarship letter and feel a different kind of warmth, the knowledge that something whole had grown from the hurt. My foundation became a place where people could come and be helped without being judged. Its walls were plastered with photographs of students smiling in their white coats, children of janitors, single mothers, first-generation college kids, faces that looked like mine. That is what I chose to build from the wreckage. Years later, I stood on a stage in a different city, introducing a cohort of doctors we'd sponsored. I still remembered the exact sound of the fork clattering in that restaurant the night he handed me the papers. But the memory no longer had the power to make me wince. It was a lesson, a map. On the drive home from the gala, the radio played a song I hadn't heard in a long time. I thought of the path that had brought me there: bread dough under my fingernails, midnight shifts, courtroom lights, the taste of coffee in a storage locker. And I allowed myself to feel something that felt dangerously like peace. Adrian and I never returned to the shape of anything we'd once been. We weren't reconciled in the small domestic sense. We were, however, bound by an uncommon honesty. He had inflicted harm, he had tried to patch it in the only way he knew how, and I had taken the tools he left and tried to stop that harm from reaching others. He lived his sentence of service without fanfare. I ran the foundation with stubborn tenderness. One winter afternoon, years after that first envelope, I found a small, folded note in the mail: no return address. Inside, in that same calm handwriting I had once loved for its foolishness and now respected for its contrition, there were 3 words: "Thank you, live well." I folded the note into my hand and felt it warm from my palm. I thought of how fragile and ferocious life is, how mistakes can be confessed, and how good can be made from what was broken. I kept the note not as proof of anything but as a reminder that the final reckoning is not always about punishment. Sometimes it is about transformation. Sometimes it's about what we build from the ashes. And in the stillness of my office, with the Brooks Foundation's latest cohort photos lining the wall, I let go of the last of the old anger and felt, finally, because of everything we'd survived, free.